Hey guys, so one of the big things I get asked is why I don't cover Islam more often on this channel, and it's just simply because I don't really know as much about it. I've not really been exposed to as much material about it. I don't read quite as much about it. So I figured today we would kind of change that a little bit, and we're going to be reading a little Islamic text, kind of, simply titled Major Sins. I figured if there's one way to learn about Islam and get a little introduction to it, it's to learn about what we should and shouldn't be doing. Well, not we, I'm not a Muslim, but what they believe people should and shouldn't be doing. What exactly are these major sins, these most terrible things in the world that you can get punished for all eternity for? Let's find out. First up in the book, we do get a definition of major sin, which I think is always important. People always talk about, do you believe in sin? Do you think this is a sin? And I'm like, as an atheist, I'm like, I don't really think sin is a thing necessarily. I think there are good things and bad things to do, but I don't necessarily believe in sin as is defined here. This book defines major sin as what is forbidden by Allah and his messenger in the Quran and the Sunnah, in addition to what is narrated on the authority of early Muslims. In this text, Allah the Most High also promises whoever avoids the major sins to admit him to paradise. So very basically, a sin is just an action or a thing that Allah forbids, and if you don't sin, if you don't do these major sins, you'll go to paradise or heaven and be rewarded, right? So what is the worst thing we can do? What is the number one major sin? Ascribing associates to Allah the Most High. The worst major sin is shirk. To hold that Allah has an equal, whereas he has created you, and to worship another with him, whether it be a stone, tree, sun, moon, prophet, sheikh, star, angel, or other, this is the greatest shirk mentioned by Allah. False worship is indeed the highest wrongdoing. Of course, it's false worship or worshipping another god or not worshipping a god at all. Not, anything to do with intentionally hurting other people, or, intentionally doing something bad, or intentionally taking something, hurting someone. What? None of that, no, just false worship. Now, you might call me a cynic, but you could say that if there was a person or group of people who were making up a belief system to control another group of people, then they might feel the need to essentially scare people into following them a little bit. They might want to prevent anyone from questioning their authority or from looking elsewhere for answers, right? They may, hypothetically, make up some rules to ensure people follow them without question by saying, if you don't worship me, if you don't follow me, if you dare to question anything I say, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. Hypothetically, that might be the best way to convince people to follow you completely. I think that's what's happening here. A lot of people say, atheists have no morals, or atheists have no sense of what's right and wrong. But for me, the worst thing you can do in life is to intentionally hurt another person or group of people. It's not just not worshipping some supposedly perfect being. That doesn't even come into the top 10 of worst things you can do. I think if there was a God who created people and his priority was making sure that we all unquestioningly worshipped him and licked his little butt, instead of looking out for each other and trying to create a good world, I think if his priority was butt licking instead of caring for each other, that would be a pretty twisted God, And yeah, the whole thing about Allah's not your equal, he's superior, he's your superior, that's, again, it's just a bit messed up to me. Imagine you're in a workplace, you work in an office or something, and your boss is like, look, it's more important that you spend every day worshipping me and praying to me and giving me a little bit of your paycheck than not killing your fellow employees. He might say, yeah, killing your fellow employees is also wrong, but it's more important that you worship me. Because I am your boss, your superior. I gave you this job, and so I deserve that unquestioning level of worship. It's a little bit weird and twisted, isn't it? Anyway, interestingly, after this, and only after this, do they bring up the sin of killing someone. Interestingly though, they don't really make a big deal out of killing non-believers, if that makes sense. Like, they don't really make a big deal out of killing people of other religions or killing atheists or whatever. They just say it's really bad to kill a Muslim. They do technically title it killing a human being, but the whole chunk of the text is about don't kill another Muslim, which is interesting, you know? Again, it's kind of like a survival thing. It's like a protect your own group, but don't really worry about the others, you know? So there we go. Teeny tiny little throwaway part about how don't kill other Muslims, and then it's onto a big essay about how sorcery is bad because it's not 100% worshipping Allah without question. Seriously, it literally says, sorcery is a major sin because the sorcerer must necessarily disbelieve. It's all about just stopping people from questioning you again. That's all there is to it. Also, what I find really interesting is that while the big complicated topic of like not killing people, which should be really important, and you should probably say quite a lot about it, that gets one page in this book. The topic of praying and why you have to pray. And if you don't pray, you're going to hell. If you're late to pray, you're going to hell. If you pray in the wrong way, you're going to hell. All that stuff gets 8 pages in this book dedicated to it. 8 pages! I can't help but think their priorities are a little bit off. One of those is slightly more important to talk about than the other, I think. One of them is worse than the other. One of them is arguably more complex than the other. But praying is the priority, apparently. Next up in the book, again in a similar vein to most of these first ones, is not paying a zakat, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is like a monetary offering to Allah. Again, interesting how the worst things in your life are like about not allowing yourself to be controlled by religion, you know? The worst thing you can do is not allow yourself to be controlled by these people, apparently. You know, it's not about how you should treat other people and shape the world around you. It's just about following what these people at the top say unquestioningly. Interesting that, isn't it? Again, you know, it all just comes back to this control thing. And this says to me that whoever came up with these rules, because let's be honest, it probably almost definitely wasn't a supernatural all-knowing being. Whoever came up with these rules cares more about indoctrination and having people under their control than they actually care about the well-being of other human beings, you know? If we skip forward a few sections in this book, we get a little passage about adultery and how adultery is wrong. Not because it's about breaking a partner's trust, but because an adulterer is not a believer at the time of committing adultery. That's why it's wrong. And then because they clearly, like, care about the people involved, and they really want to understand why people do things like commit adultery. They really want to help rehabilitate adulterers and help rebuild relationships. They clearly really care about that. Because apparently if someone has committed adultery, then they must be stoned to death and then will be hanged by their genitals in hellfire, on which they will be scourged with slashes of iron. So helpful. Then moving on, there's some stuff about how sodomy is wrong because it's the devil tempting you, apparently. And then there's this really weird passage, right, with lines like, among juveniles are those who may be more beautiful than women. He may be most fascinating. This is clearly written by someone who has an interest in young boys. Like, there's no getting around that. He clearly does. He goes on to write, once this person entered a public bath and a handsome boy entered after him. Sufyan said, get him out, because whenever I see a woman, I see a devil. But whenever I see a handsome boy, I see a group of devils. So, clearly attracted to young boys, and somehow this is the boy's fault, and the boy needs to stay away from you because you can't control your urges, and you might be tempted to put your penis in his butt. Is that what you're saying? You can't control yourself, so the child needs to stay away and not tempt you? I get it, you know, like, attraction to children is something that people can't help. But are we just gonna sit here and gloss over the fact that you shouldn't act on those attractions because it is harmful to the children? Are we just gonna ignore that and pretend that the only reason you shouldn't act on it is because those children are like the embodiment of several devils trying to tempt you? Is that really what we're going with here? Kind of warped. Next up, we get a bunch of major sins being arrogance, pride, conceit, vanity, and haughtiness. So, Karl Marx is often, like, paraphrased as saying, like, and it's super famous, the whole religion is the opium of the people, right? Everyone kind of knows that. And it implies that religion is used to kind of keep people content and not necessarily happy, but at least thinking they're happy. It's kind of used to keep them sort of like dulled and unquestioning and keep them in their place, maintain the status quo, you know? And what better way, really, to ensure that everyone stays in their lowly little place with no ideas above their station, no ambition, none of that, than to tell them that it's completely, like, immoral and terrible to have normal human emotions like a little bit of pride in yourself when you do something good. What better way to quash the spirits of people than to quash feelings like pride? From, like, a completely personal perspective, like, I definitely spent a big chunk of my life feeling kind of, like, trapped and stuck, and I was kind of like a crappy person with no real, like, ambition, and I definitely wasn't fulfilling my potential because I had no self-esteem and I didn't believe in myself. As soon as I allowed myself to start to feel a little bit of pride in what I was doing, whether it was just like, you know what, I did take a good photograph, or I did deserve this good mark on this essay because I worked really hard on this. As soon as I allowed myself to start feeling little bits like that, I got so much more confidence in myself, and I felt so much more empowered to kind of push myself further and try new things and try and better myself and grow as a person. Obviously, if you're like kind of too proud and too arrogant and too haughty and vain and whatever, of course that's a bad thing, but I don't think a little bit of pride is a bad thing. I think it can really help people grow. And it's clear that by preventing anyone from feeling pride in their accomplishments, calling it vanity and arrogance and so on, by doing that, you prevent people from really fulfilling their potential. You prevent people from pushing themselves and questioning things and trying out new stuff. You do maintain this status quo. You don't let anyone rise above their lowly little station, and you maintain that power. That's why these are put in here as major sins, not because they're actually bad, but because the people who wrote these rules want to maintain that control. They don't want anyone getting ideas that, you know, they might not be right and someone better could be in charge. Next up in this text, we learn that wine is bad, but we never really get a good reason why. We're just told a drunkard is like a worshipper of an idol. So we're back to this whole narrative again. And of course, we get told that wine is the worst of the major sins, which seems like both an exaggeration and a complete contradiction to what we've been told earlier about how false worship is the worst of all major sins. So make up your mind, mate. Punishment for drinking wine isn't quite as horrific as eternal torture like it is for adultery. Instead, the punishment for drinking wine is simply, you'll be denied it in the next world. So that's not too terrible, is it? I say, go ahead and drink some wine if you fancy, you know, everything in moderation, but enjoy yourself if you want. That's why I'm going to hell. And then there's a lovely bit about cutting off hands and feet if someone steals, which is, of course, in no way archaic or barbaric, is it? I do have to say though, like, whenever I make a video like this, whether it be about Islam or about something Christian or whatever, I even got it with, you know, the Pearls book on child abuse. I get people saying that I'm taking things out of context and I'm interpreting them wrong. So before I get any of those comments, I do have a serious question for you guys. Can you please explain to me what other way there is to interpret the line, Allah severely punishes whoever steals people's property by cutting off his or her hand? Tell me that's not archaic and barbaric. Tell me how else you interpret that other than Allah cuts off thieves' hands. Seriously, please. What am I taking out of context? Next up, we have probably the most disgusting sin in this book. Far worse than killing someone, far worse than paedophilia, far worse than adultery. It's women imitating men, and vice versa. Oh, yeah, you heard that right, guys. May Allah curse effeminate men and masculine women. When a woman wears a man's clothing, she will incur Allah's curse upon herself. So, you know those, like, lazy weekends I have where I lounge around in dance t-shirts? I'm gonna incur Allah's curse. And it's disgusting. I truly, truly deserve it for being an awful human being. Oh, seriously though, this is so ridiculous. People take, like, ideas of gender just so over the top and too seriously, and I don't care. Like biological sex is a fact that we can't get around, right? We have different DNA, different chromosomes, different genitals. That's like a thing. It's a fact. Okay, put it to one side. And then there's gender. Gender is a social construct, and our ideas of what gender is and what it means, they have changed over time, and they will continue to change over time. And some people get way too protective and defensive about what gender is, you know? Like, oh, I really don't care if you identify as masculine or feminine or male or female or something in between. I don't care. It doesn't impact my life. And if someone else identifies a certain way and you don't like it, why does it matter? Because again, it doesn't impact your life, does it? Why can't we let people just be like happy and comfortable and confident in their own bodies and present in whatever way they want? Like, it doesn't affect anyone else, and it's really not a big deal. Who cares if a person wears trousers or a dress, or heels or boots, or has long hair or short hair, or wears makeup or doesn't wear makeup, or like, I don't even know, like, none of it matters. Oh my god, I think people should be allowed to feel comfortable in their bodies however they want, and as long as it's not hurting anyone else, as long as it's not like detrimental to their health, like, why does it matter? If I chose to wear red lipstick today instead of pink, would it have any effect on you guys? No. So why does it matter if a man or a woman or whoever chooses to wear some lipstick or makeup or not wear makeup? It doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. Next up, oh, no, okay, no. No more pee. Like, I'm not touching this one. No. Next. Next up well, that's a bit of an overreaction, mate. We have the lovely rule of whoever listens to people who are averse to his listening shall have molten lead poured into his ears on the day of judgment. Lovely. Now, we're reasonably far into the video, and I know what you guys are thinking. Where's the misogyny? No sexism here. I'm a little disappointed. Well, don't worry, guys. Next up, we have the 47th major sin, a wife's rebellion against her husband. You're in for a treat. Remember, ladies, if you do not sleep with your husband whenever he wants, you will be cursed by Allah. Middle of the night, you don't really feel it? Cursed by Allah. Got a bit of a headache, you want to say no? Cursed by Allah. Not in the mood? Cursed by Allah. Remember, once you get married, your vagina is not yours anymore. It is purely your husband's, and if you don't allow him 24/7 access, you're the bad person. Similarly, if you dare to let anyone into your home who hasn't got your husband's permission, you're an awful person. Sorry, no, it's your husband's home, because like a woman could own her own property. Don't be silly. Also, don't leave the house without your husband's permission, because you're basically just his prisoner. And if you dare, I don't know, like, pop to the shop without his say-so, you'll probably suffer for eternity in hell, so best not risk it, you know? Why not just get him to lock you in the house when he leaves? That way you can't get out even if you want to. Best be safe, you know? And if this wasn't enough, you've got to remember that also a woman should be loyal before her husband, lower her gaze before him, don't dare look him in the eye, keep silent when he speaks, because who wants to be married to an actual individual with their own thoughts and opinions, stand when he comes or leaves, offer herself when he sleeps, okay, perfume herself, brush her teeth, be adorned in his company, because, you know, a husband doesn't want to see the real natural you. He just wants you like a dressed up little Barbie doll all the time, okay? Leave aside what annoys him in his presence, like slandering, or in absence, like treachery in bed, property, or home. Honour his family and kinsmen, and be content of what he brings, however little. So no pressure, ladies. You'll be fine. But, you know, it's not all one-sided, you know. As well as, like, all these crazy demands on women, there are also some rules for men. For example, listen! Treat women kindly. They are like prisoners in your hands. Oh. Now, I know we've not had a don't kill anyone rule, okay, just other Muslims, rule in a while, but, you know, it has taken all the way from number 22 to number 52 to mention not hurting people again. I thought not hurting people was a pretty big part of life, but apparently it doesn't need mentioning all that often in Islam. But, like I say, it does come up again. 52 is not hurting one's neighbour. 53 and 54 are not to hurt Muslims or servants of Allah, which are basically the same sort of thing. there's not really stuff here about just not hurting people, not hurting humans. It's all about not hurting other Muslim people, so priorities apparently. But you know, enough of this don't hurt people stuff. That's not really important. They're kind of those take it or leave it rules, probably. Joking. What's really important to remember is number 57. If you are a slave, don't flee your owner. Fleeing your owner as a slave is a major sin, and you'll probably burn in hell for eternity. Yeah, remember, if you want to be your own person, if you want to be independent and free, that makes you an awful person. Stay with your master, you slave. Oh, and with that, which is probably going to be taken out of context at some point and used to prove that I'm a terrible person, with that, I'm going to end this here. This was definitely a wild ride for me. This definitely opened my eyes to an interesting side of Islam. Yeah, so much is just so outdated and barbaric and, yeah, horrific. Truly, truly horrific. Obviously, some of the rules are good on the surface, like, you know, don't steal and don't kill people. But they do miss out a few big ones, like, you know, don't molest children and, you know, don't psychologically torture someone. I don't know. Yeah, no, it's really bizarre. I'm done. My brain's melted and I need to go take a nap. Oh, anyway, let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you think of the major Islamic sins. Let me know what you think they missed out. Let me know what you think they got right. Let me know what you think they got wrong. What do you think about a wife being her husband's prisoner? Oh my god, and with that, I'm done for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for everyone who's supporting my channel this month, especially everyone supporting me on Patreon, including Gambit and his chauffeur, Deshawn, Mark Darner, Christian Berg, Rachel B. Royer, Jadeon Sheppard, Jaylee Moore, Religions BS, Sir Michael Moore, Christian Opitz, Sage Villarreal, Greg Ladd, and Spencer Young. You're all seriously amazing, and I can't thank you enough. Also, check out everyone else mentioned on the end screen here and down in the description below. And if you got a little bit of spare time and you want to check out my merch store, then you know, you can do that if you want. No pressure.